Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Well, good evening, friends, and welcome to this May 21st, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Tonight, there have been no details about the cost of the deal, but Russia and China have worked out a deal on they've signed a long-awaited gas supply agreement.
Russia and China have signed a long-awaited gas supply agreement. It's a big deal. We'd had no details about the actual cost of it, but unofficially, it's put at more than $400 billion. Well, let's just analyse that a bit, because Aaron's with me now. Long-awaited, certainly.
Yep.
Even more important politically now, perhaps, than it would have been 6 months, a year ago, but it's a big deal.
It is a big deal. 38 billion cubic metres of gas every single year. You say it's been a long time coming. A decade. This has been in the making for a decade. There's always been sticking points about the price, but obviously they've come to an agreement. And look, very important, as you say, very important for Russia. And let's be frank, Russia, many will say, has all its economic eggs in one basket, and that is energy, basically. It's got a lot of it, and it needs buyers. So China now, and it's interesting, this will come from the eastern part of Russia, a different gas field to the one that supplies Western Europe with its gas. They've got to build a new eastern pipeline as well. That's going to take, obviously some time. But it does mean, in some ways, I guess, Russia doesn't need to be so dependent on Europeans buying its gas. And we're in a period of time, as you know, David, right, with the tensions with Ukraine and, of course, the subsequent tensions between Russia and the rest of Europe. Many European countries have been trying, basically, to become less reliant on buying Russian gas. So, yeah, it's an interesting scenario at the moment.
There's part of it is business. The other part, of course, is huge strategic importance as well, if you're making an alliance with China on this sort of scale.
Well, I mean, China and Russia, you know, for Russia, China's its largest trading partner. I think last year I was looking at some of the numbers. They've been trading, I think it's about $90 billion in 2013. So it's all about, yes, closer ties and trading ties, economic ties between Russia and China. But it's interesting because, you know, we've been obviously focused on this off the back again of the tensions between Europe and well, certainly Western Europe and Russia, and looking at these individual stories within Europe about ways that these countries, European countries, can wean themselves off, if you will, of Russian gas. Remember, a third of Europe's gas basically comes from Russia. So as Europe tries to wean its way off, you know, it makes you wonder now if Russia will sort of go, you know, don't buy our gas. That's not a problem. We've got China, a $400 billion agreement.
There's always going to be a market for the energy, isn't there? And I suppose they realise that they can turn another direction.
That's very true.
And I guess it's also a reality that Western Europe knows it cannot depend in the way it used to think it could on a sure flow of that energy.
And look, the worries, if you will, and the tension still, you know, we've seen in the past where Russia has turned off the taps over spats with Ukraine, for example, turn off the taps with Ukraine, and then that has that knock-on effect to the rest of Europe. So, look, you know, very interesting story. I mean, look, the details are still coming out. It's going to be interesting to get an official value, as I said, and you mentioned unofficially $400 billion. It's, you know, it's a chunk of change, isn't it? But more details are emerging, so I'll nip out and keep across this for you.
Friends, the Prince of Wales is reported to have criticized the Russian President Vladimir Putin for behaving like Hitler, according to a woman who fled Poland in 1939. Marion Ferguson was speaking after she met the prince at the Immigration Museum in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where she is a volunteer. Nicholas Witchell has this report.
Well, they've just put out a statement on their blog, eBay. There's been some confusion about this because one statement appeared and then was swiftly taken down, and now a new one has appeared, saying later today
It's a visit of 3 days' duration, packed with more than 40 engagements. This was Charles today in Manitoba, and literally hundreds of brief conversations with strangers. On Monday, the Prince was in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It was there that he met Marianne Ferguson. She told him how, as a child, she and her family, this is her on the right with her sister, had lived in the city of Danzig between Germany and Poland. They were Jewish, and they fled for their lives ahead of the invasion by the Nazis and their leader Adolf Hitler, an invasion which led to the Second World War. In his conversation over a cup of tea with Mrs. Ferguson, Prince Charles evidently drew a comparison between what the Nazis did in Europe then and what the Russians under Vladimir Putin are doing now in Ukraine. The precise words are disputed, but a Daily Mail reporter who was present, that's her behind the pillar very close to the conversation, claims the prince said in relation to Ukraine, and now Putin is doing just about the same as Hitler. Charles has met Vladimir Putin several times in the past, and in a couple of weeks they'll both be attending the ceremonies to mark the 70th anniversary of D-Day. Any comparison between Mr. Putin and Hitler will be seen by the Russian leadership as deeply offensive.
You can't be much more insulting about a Russian than comparing them to Hitler, because Hitler, of course, killed 26 million Russians. And I suspect that privately he will be rather angered by it.
Clearly a private.
Here, political leaders are divided over the remarks. The Deputy Prime Minister said the Prince was entitled to say what he did.
Prince Charles is able, I would have thought, to be free to express himself. I don't know exactly what he did or didn't say in that conversation, because he thought it was a private conversation.
The leader of the opposition also said the Prince had a point.
I think he has got a point about President Putin's actions, and I think he's absolutely entitled to say that there are real concerns about that.
But Nigel Farage said the Prince should keep quiet.
Sometimes there are issues that it might be better if elected governments dealt with more than the monarchy.
Interventions by Charles have certainly raised eyebrows before, but as he moves ever closer to the throne, they pose obvious risks, as the Prince knows. One point of view is that Charles was merely articulating what many people have said in private. The question, though, is whether it was wise for the future King of the United Kingdom to share such views with a complete stranger, or might it now be more prudent for him to follow more closely the example of his mother? Nicholas Witchell, BBC News, at Buckingham Palace.
Okay, thank you, Nicholas Witchell, for that extremely interesting report. Friends, next we'll go to, and I apologize, I believe I may have left my microphone off as I was explaining. I got the videos out of order. I wanted to play that one after playing the story about Russia and China getting it together. You know, yesterday's news, there was some speculation that Russia and China weren't going to come to an agreement on that gas deal. But here in today's news, voila, they've pulled it off. But there's a problem that eBay has announced. Normally we wouldn't mention a commercial source such as eBay, but many of you probably use it. Even the church ministry here uses it to make certain purchases of equipment. And so the church ministry has an account on eBay. And we're signing off right after this video, friends, to do as eBay is urging and asking their users to change their passwords following a cyber attack that has compromised one of eBay's databases. The U.S. firm said the database was hacked between, well, hey, you know what? What I'm about to tell you is in this video. Let's watch it, then I'll be back to sign off and encourage you, if you have an eBay account, to do as I'm going to do and go and change your password right away without delay. Listen to this.
Well, they've just put out a statement on their blog, eBay. There's been some confusion about this because one statement appeared and then was swiftly taken down, and now a new one has appeared, saying later today they'll be asking all eBay users to change their passwords because of a cyber attack that compromised a database containing encrypted passwords and other non-financial data. It sounds like quite a serious cyber attack, but they then go on to say no financial data, they're stressing that, and they have got no evidence of any damage being caused. But they do say this actually happened between late February and early March. And involved eBay customers' names, passwords, email addresses.
Which begs the question as to why it is now that we're only hearing about it, doesn't it?
Exactly. It looks like they've been investigating this for some time. Maybe they've only just actually realised what happened. And there may have been some sort of debate going on as to how they needed to react, given the fact they say there has been no impact, no increase in fraudulent activity on the site. But eBay is an incredibly important place for the people who use it. Lots of transactions going on. They're separately stressing that PayPal, which they own, has not been affected by this, that people's financial details have not been compromised. But it will be a worry to the millions of people who use eBay.
And friends, if you have an eBay account, I encourage you to do as I'm going to do, and that is make haste. Go sign on eBay and change your password now. We're signing off early tonight, partly because of that and partly because I'm building a new studio downstairs, and the drill, as I was screwing in some screws, the battery charger thing on the bottom whammed up. Now my jaw is recovering nicely from that pain and that swelling I had. And then I go to and bang my head with the bottom of when the drill flipped up while I was screwing a screw. It flipped up and banged me on top of the head. I got a knot on top of my head now. But I'll be okay. Don't worry. God willing, and the knot don't get too big and the creek don't rise, we plan on being back again tomorrow night for our Thursday night report of the current day's news, which is getting extremely interesting. I think you may agree. We had some reason the past couple of days to feel that things are rather urgent. We'll be talking more about that as we go, friends, but that's it for tonight. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen, saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.